be attached there, then you start suspecting. And that's when you start protesting. By asking the Board of Election Inspectors, yung minutes of voting na sinasabi at yung local protest, mag-request ka ng form. Meron silang prepared form where you write down your protest. And you'll have to sign it, your watchers have to sign it, and the members of the board also have to sign and acknowledge the minutes. Everything that happens during the election process is recorded somewhere in the minutes of voting and in the PCOS machine itself. Now, one of the other safeguards that's very important is that yung ballot. Noon makakapagpasok ka ng balota na galing sa ibang lugar. At ngayon hindi na mo pwede yun. The ballots are precinct specific. Pag nagpasok ka ng balota sa loob ng PCOS machine na hindi dapat sa presinto nyo, hindi tatanggapin ng precinct. Hindi tatanggapin ng makina. So once nangyari yun, report ka agad yun sa board, sa election board. So alam natin ngayon na ngayon mas high-tech pang cheating. Ang isang cheating na hindi mahirap nating ma-prevent, even with good watchers, ay yung hacking from outside or the use of rogue machines from outside, because those machines can transmit results that might not reflect the results of the precinct itself. And of course, hacking, even the United States was not able to prevent hacking, because they said that they accused Russia of hacking some of their elections in some places in the United States. That's one part that we find hard to prevent. But one thing that we can observe ay isa sa mga bagay na pwedeng obserbahan ng mga watchers natin ay kung anong ginagawa ng election board. Kasi lahat ng bagay na yan may timing. Iba na ho ang election board natin ngayon kasi hindi tulad dati na kailangan public school teachers lang, basta public school teacher, i-assign mo na sa election board. Pero ngayon, voluntary na ho ang election boards. But they still have to be public school teachers. Hindi na pwede na pilitin ang public school teachers na mag-election board. The other thing important here is hindi tulad noon, they have to undergo a 3-day seminar conducted by the DOST. So yung mga problems noon na tulad ng jamming, tulad ng yung mga maliliit na technical problems, kailangan paghintay pa ng isang technician na galing sa labas, medyo na train na ho sila dyan. So some minor things like jamming and those things can be addressed now by members of the election board. Hindi tulad dati. After the 3-day training, they will still have to undergo an exam, practical and written. So kung tinupad talaga nito, and may training na nangyari nung March. There were two periods of training for various election boards in the country. So for all the minor problems that might have occurred in 2010, 2013, 2016, and 2019, medyo na-address na yon at nakasama sa training ng members ng election board. May second level training pa para sa mga technicians na mag-assist sa election board. So, siguro naman, yung mga nakita nilang problema noong time na yon, mababawasan. Although, halimbawa dun sa may mga problema na nangyari noong 2010 na lalong lumala noong 2016. Pero yun ay dahil sa nabanggit ni Attorney George na luma na ang machine. Ang machine na gagamitin ngayong taon na to, nagamit na twice. Nagamit na twice, hindi, pinarefurbish lang nila, pero hindi ito mga bagong machine. So kung ganyan ang mangyayari, maraming mangyayaring technical problems. Hopefully, mas bihasa ngayon ng members ng election board na i-address itong mga problems na ito. Next slide. Next slide. Now, all over the country, there are about 92,000 machines being used. This is the largest number of machines being used by a single area, in a single area throughout the world now. Even more than India and Brazil. Okay. Now, as I said, even with the improvement in the technology, the VCMs cannot prevent the old types of cheating like vote buying, but they can prevent specific instances of fraud. We emphasize that the voting here is manual, so pwede pa rin bumoto ang hindi botante, no? Basta nakalusot sa Board of Election Inspectors, nakakuha ng ballot, pwede pa rin mangyari yung ganun type of cheating. Pero one way that they have started to address this is kasi walang pera ang Pilipinas, ang COMELEC para dito. Sa certain areas in Mindanao na malakas ang instances ng botan na isa lang taong nagboboto para sa lahat, nag-install na po sila ng voter verifying machine, VVMs. Ang mangyayari dito is when the voter votes, pag nagboto siya, kailangan niyang ilagay ang kanyang thumbprint. Kung hindi nagkatugma kung sa information na nasa makina, doon sa biometrics ng voter, hindi pagbobotohin. Hindi pagbobotohin. At once pinasok na yun, at before he puts it in, he has to put in his thumbprint again. And if it's not the person whose thumbprint is supposed to have that stored in the machine will reject it. Unfortunately, this should be very good because it eliminates one major type of cheating. You know? Unfortunately, there was budget only for Mindanao, not for this year. And I don't even know if they will use it for the most important areas sa Mindanao na malakas ang instances ng pandaraya. No? Okay. Another safeguard that comes out with the new technology is the audit log. At the end of the voting, at the end of the day, when the election returns have been printed out and transmission has started, the machine will print an audit log. Now, the audit log is a second by second, minute by minute log of everything that occurred in the machine. So if the machine is inappropriately touched at a time when it was not supposed to be touched, nakalagay doon. Kung lahat ng pumasok na balota, nakalagay doon. Lahat ng sinubukan ipasok na fake ballots, nakalagay sa audit log. So, doon pa lang mako-compare mo sa minutes ng election board at yung audit log kung ano ang totoong nangyayari. Now, isa pang napaka-importanteng ebidensya na kailangan natin, pag pumili po kayo ng watcher, tanungin ninyo kung huwag kayong pumili ng watcher na walang smartphone, no? Kasi kailangan kunan ninyo ng video o picture yung mga kalokohang pwedeng mangyari o tingin niyo nangyayari kasi ebidensya po yun. Para sa watcher ho, hindi bawal ang magdala ng cellphone, no? Pero ang bawal lang, ang voter mismo ang nagdadala ng cellphone kasi ayaw nating kumukuha sila ng picture ng kanilang photo para ipakita sa nagbayad in cases of vote buying. Watcher lang ang pwedeng may cellphone. At hindi rin siya pwedeng lumapit sa botante para kunan ng pictures yung mga binoboto. Dapat nakalakip yung kanyang balota before ipasok yun sa counting machine sa isang security envelope. Na hindi naman lahat, may mga presinto na walang security envelope, isang problema rin yun. No? Now, can we go back? So, as I said, the audit log is a chronological record of all specific operations, procedures, or events affecting a vote counting machine. Documentary evidence of the sequence of activities of the VCMs, noting all the details like the time when they were turned on, the time they were turned off, the time when the SD card slot was attached, the time when the transmission cable was attached, are all in the machine. No? So anything that occurs to the machine is found in the audit log. No? For instance, if the report comes to COMELEC that voting stopped at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock, which is the end of voting this year. Pero nakita sa machine na 3 o'clock pa lang sarado na machine, makikita yung disparity. No? So that's when so now evidence of yung discrepancy na yun, evidence of possible machinations by the Board of Election Inspectors. This happened in Biliran in 2016 when the proof of cheating was based on the discrepancy of the report of the election board versus the audit log. Next slide. Okay. Next slide. Now, of course, the primary functions of the election board, the other more important aspect of actual voting is to conduct voting and the counting of votes in the respective polling places. Yes. The print election returns and transmit the election returns. No? As Attorney George emphasized, the election returns are important, and only between our major other presidential candidate and Bongbong Marcos, only Bongbong has a right, only Bongbong's watcher has a right to a copy of the election returns. Dahil tayo lang ang si Bongbong lang ang may major political party affiliation, yan yung PFP. Ang Liberal Party is not recognized for the purpose of watchers for the President. No? Siguro kay Kiko pwede sila. Ewan ko kung na-register. But it should be clear that as an independent candidate, she is not entitled to official watchers. Only PFP is entitled to official watchers. So when somebody tries to get a copy of the election return in behalf of Lenny, claiming that they're Liberal Party or whatever party or unity, our watchers should object. Kasi ba, hindi ho sila, wala hong ibang watcher para kay Lenny. In fact, nangyayari na ito sa overseas elections. May nabasa akong protest last week na pinotesta ang isang precinct, isang embassy na pumayag na Liberal Party ang mag-represent kay Lenny Robredo. Yes?
So, pagka meron mong pumilid na pumasok sa precinct, kanino po sila lalapit? Mga natin, to report?
First, Board of Election Inspectors.
Okay.
Very important that they first object. Dapat, so isa pang bukod sa dapat meron silang cellphone, another important thing is that dapat malalakas ang loob sila na mag-object, no? Kasi mga teachers ang mga kanila baka sindakin sila. Huwag silang masindak kasi kung tama naman ang kanilang objection, dapat nakakuha. Now, to make sure that the objection or protest is properly entertained by the Board of Election Inspectors, the Commission on Elections furnishes all precincts with copies of the form for this purpose. So they should they should insist. Hindi pwedeng sabi-sabi lang o kunwari susulat ng DEI. Humingi sila ng form ng protest, form ng complaint, no? At dapat pirmahan nila at pirmahan rin ng Board of Election Inspectors. Ngayon, kung pwede rin silang kumuha ng copy, ng picture, ng complaint na sinainan ng Board of Election Inspectors as their own piece of evidence. Their own piece of evidence. Kasi maraming election boards ang magsasabi na wala silang kopya. Wala silang kopya except
we have our own watchers, and they doesn't have, should not have. But how about the other political parties like UNESCO?
well, for the other political parties, kasi one for the major political party, and I think the major is ours,
Yes.
is PFP, and one for the minor. And I don't think I don't know if they will consider, who among the others they will consider the minor party.
So there's only one for the major.
I think technically for president, there's only one major.
Opo.
Yes.
And sa minor po. We
Sa
have
ma-
not determined yet.
Not determined yet. Okay.
Si Lenny kasi walang
Pero
partido.
independent siya.
Oh, yes.
So partido pa lang. Federal.
Next slide, next. As the COMELEC deputies in the conduct of the elections and next, and maintain order in the precinct, you know. As we've been told, if you've been watchers before, ang pwede lang sa loob ng presinto ay yung voters, yung mga magboboto, yung election board members, at yung watchers, official watchers. Yung official watchers, and we will discuss this later on, yan yun lang yung assigned designation from the chairman of, or whoever was delegated by the appointed by the political party. Otherwise, hindi ho pwede. Even members, even barangay tanods, and even the chairman of the barangay cannot enter the precinct unless he's voting. They are only allowed in the precinct if they're there to vote. Or for some important reasons have been properly requested by a majority vote of the members of the election board. Otherwise, they have no right to be inside the precinct. Opo.
Supposing our watcher does not say anything, can a voter makes an objection with the observation, assuming somebody is acting as watcher for the other party, for Lenny? Halimbawa, can a voter point the objection that this watcher is not entitled to be here because he cannot watch
The voter can, but not to the extent of disrupting. Kasi,
No, not disrupting.
no, we know po, any voter can, and the voter can. But ang mangyayari dyan, kasi nasa subjective perception na ng board yan eh. Pwede lang i-claim na he was disrupting. Halimbawa, kampi sila sa kabila. And the voter was pointing out a mistake that may have been committed against our candidate, you know. Normally, pwede yon. Pero, nakahanap po ang COMELEC ngayon para hindi masyadong ma-disrupt ang elections ng isang provision na pwede kang kasuhan ng election offense for disrupting the elections. Masyado ka sigurong masyado kang unruly o masyado kang nakikipag-debate, halos nakikipag-debate ka na with the Board of Election Inspectors about a point that you want to point out because somebody may have been doing something like fiscal had pointed out. You know. Kung maganda yung kanilang kung maganda ang kanilang patience, they would probably tolerate it. Pero kung harass na sila, medyo aburido na ang kanilang baka makasuhan rin kayo ng disrupting, no? which now is considered an election offense. So, timpla-timpla lang yan. Meron namang paraan na sabihin sa Board of Election Inspectors na hindi masyadong nagmumukhang china-challenge mo yung authority nila o yung soundness ng kanilang performance ng kanilang duty.
So, can you just approach the...
You can quietly approach the chair if you're a voter.
I'm a voter.
I'm a voter, and I
And
mean
I
I
am
finished.
subject. Can I approach the member of the board?
When I inserted my ballot, may nangyari na hindi dapat, I would already tell them ganun ang nangyari.
Very politely.
Very politely,
Pwede.
Pwede ho yun, oh. Huwag lang umabot sa kanilang konsepto ng disrupting. Other functions designated by the Commission on Elections. Next. Now, the BEI is composed of a chairman, a member, and a poll clerk. No? Ngayon, pare-pareho na sila except the chairman. Ano? And there's a fourth member who must be technically capable. But even technically capable in the 2010 elections, basta may alam lang sa computers, okay na. Pero ibang-iba ang computer sa PCOS machine, no? Ibang-iba ang computer, saka yung problems ng PCOS machine, ibang-iba sa problems ng computer. So, ngayon, lahat sila dapat properly trained. May example sila. Kung wala sila maipapakita, if they're trying to do their job and you notice na mukhang hindi sila competent, ask if they've been trained and show their certificate from the DOTC. No? Because they should be properly trained by the Department of Science and Technology. No? This is for the purpose of avoiding the problems that occurred in the last elections, in the last few elections. No? Now, all should be public school teachers. But it's no longer mandatory for kung ayaw ng public school teacher na ma-designate siya, hindi na mo pwedeng pilitin. Tinanggal na, the last time na compulsory ito was 2016. Next slide. Next slide. So as I pointed out, under resolution number 86 of the Commission on Elections, there's a fourth member, hindi lang 3 members yan, who is supposed to know how to assist them as to the technical aspects of the operation of the PCOS machine. Next slide. Now, the election board member is also required, the qualifications, dapat registered voter siya sa municipality doon sa presinto mismo. Napaka-importante yan kasi dapat alam niya yung mga, to a certain extent, dapat kilala niya yung mga tao doon. Halimbawa, members of the BEI, hindi tiga roon. Paano makikilala yung mga taong bumoboto? Eh baka patay na yung tao na bumoboto. Yes. So, he has to be a registered voter within that precinct itself. Good moral character, known integrity and competence, also relationship to the fourth civil degree, and could speak and write in the local dialect, Filipino or English. No. Now, there's an additional requirement because of the COVID pandemic. Kailangan COVID-free. Kailangan pa. Fully vaccinated. It's not in the law, but COMELEC will require that this year. Kung sa mall lang papasok ka, dapat pakita mo yung vaccination card mo. Di lalo dapat sa presinto. No? Next slide. Disqualifications. No person shall, as we said, dapat hindi related to the fourth civil degree, yung member of the election board, to any member of the board, or to any candidate to be voted for in the polling place, or his spouse. Next slide. What happens if a member of the Board of Election Inspector is absent? No. The remaining members may by vote require him to be present. And if the purpose of his absence is to disrupt the functions of the election board, that's an election offense, and he may be ordered arrested by the election board. In the meantime, while he's not around, the elections can proceed because the election board may ask for a substitute who is also qualified. That's only for a temporary, that's only for once dumating yung totoong member, dapat malis na yung substitute nila, no? Next slide. In addition to the BI, may 3 support staff. Yan. In a single precinct, hindi kailangan ng support staff. It's only in multiple precincts, and the numbers there only to a maximum of 3 support staff. No. Next slide. Okay. Maintaining order is also one of the functions of the Board of Election Inspectors. To conduct voting and electronic counting of votes in their respective polling places, print election returns and transmit the results through the PCOS machines, act as a COMELEC deputy, maintain order in the place and premises, keep access to polling place open and unobstructed, prohibition of the use of cameras by the voters, but not the watchers. Somebody asked if the watcher in Cebu, somebody asked, she can, kasi meron siyang mounts na marami, pwede ba siyang magdala ng maraming cellphones para makuha niya lahat ng nangyayari. Eh, wala namang prohibition na gano'n. So if you're a watcher, if you want to bring 10 cameras, cellphone cameras, and they're mounted in some stand. Yes?
How about the apparel of the BEI?
The apparel of the BEI, any comfortable apparel.
No,
That's
the color.
The color, any neutral color except pink and red.
Yeah, that's clear because we are in Bicol.
Any neutral color except pink and red. Kasi, if you're a voter, pwede kang naka-pink. Wala lang nang dapat nakalagay na Lenny o anong sign yun. If you're, pwede ka rin mag-red, no? Pero, kapag BI ka, hindi na pwede yun. Isang naka-red, isang naka-green, isang naka-red. Isang naka-green. Bakit tingnan yun? Yun, bawal po yun. Bawal po yun. Next slide. Okay. This is very important. You have to instruct your watchers to go to the precinct before 5 o'clock. Or at least you should be there by 5 o'clock. Because the election board starts its functions from 5 onward. You know? That's when they open the box containing the machine and everything, the preliminaries of the voting. And the reason for that is because you have to observe what's being done to the machine from the very beginning. You know? Remember, this year, eto pa, dagdag gastos po ito sa mga kandidato, para sa mga PFP. Ngayong taon na ito, kailangang pumunta ang mga watchers 2 beses. At least 3 days before the election, the watcher has to go to the polling place for test voting, and observe the test voting process and the opening of the PCOS machine. Then on election day itself, they have to be there. Now, on election day, they have to be there at least before 5 o'clock or at 5 o'clock a.m. But for the test voting, for the test voting, it's up to the schedule of the Board of Election Inspectors. So the coordinator has to know when to instruct the watchers and what time to go. Yes?
All watchers will
Um,
be there, has to be there.
at least one. At least one.
Kasi 4,000 mo kami.
Oo, 4,000 na yan. Magastos yan.
Uh, how will the watchers know the schedule of the testing scene?
Well, ganito ang mangyayari dyan. For the testing, wala kasing designated exact time. No? So for the convenience of the board, they might say we'll do it at 3 o'clock, 3 days before the election, or some might want it. So, napaka-importante na alam ng coordinator, may overall coordinator siguro ng isang area who would know the different machines and when they would be doing testing. But ideally, I think ideally they were instructed during their training to schedule the testing to coordinate and schedule the testing at the same time para hindi magulo yung kasi sa dami ng precincts at clustered precincts dito sa Pilipinas, napakahirap. It's going to be confusing for the candidates, their watchers, and coordinators. No? So I think unless may desire na mandaya o manloko o ayaw nilang gawin yung pre-testing kasi may iba silang iniisip, that's something that you have to note. I think for example, in Quezon City, most of the pre-testing is at 9 o'clock, 3 days before the election. I think that instruction was also made to the other election boards.
Sir,
Yes?
meron po ba tayo, do we have a note from the watchers regarding their observation on the pre-testing and sealing?
Yes. We will come to that, and we also have a checklist. We will. Next slide. Okay. Can you go back? So as I said, you have to come at least for the day of voting. You have to come at 5 o'clock. Ensure that they are for the teachers. Dapat may scissors para putulin yung election, yung resibo ng voter, no? Hindi pwedeng i-tear lang na gano'n, kailangan scissors ang gagamitin ng members of the election board. Now, when you go there on the day of the election, make sure that the VCM is inside the ballot box, no? And which is fully wrapped. Alam niyo yung cling film.
Yeah.
Dapat nakarap yun completely in cling film and no evidence that someone tried to open it. No, everything is wrapped and everything contains every parts of the machine that are important contains a seal and a serial number. That has to be noted by the watcher. Not only noted, but she should take a picture of each of the state of when they open the box. If the box is closed, take a video and then they're open. And when they start opening it, continue the video until they completely open the machine. No? Now, as hindi pwede na nandun na kayo 5 a.m. at bukas na yung machine. Dapat binubuksan yan in front of the watchers. Dapat from the outer seal up to the last seal inside the machine, dapat naka-note yun. No? And then, after the opening of the machine, a member of the Board of Election Inspectors takes out the computer list of voters and posts it outside the precinct itself. Next slide. Now, let's go to the PCOS machine, which is very important. Now, as I said, every single part of the PCOS machine has a seal and a serial number. Tell the watchers to take pictures of of not of the general picture and each serial number and each seal because and compare that with the pictures that they took on the test voting day. Oo. Kung iba yung number ng serial number dun sa serial number ng actual voting, remember dalawang araw yan, may switching. No? Remember ng araw na, sa araw na yon, may nakasilat yan. Pero nung pumunta ka 3 days before, nilagay yung seal. At nakita niyo nilagay, siguro binidyo ng watcher ninyo yung seal. Dapat tignan niya kung anong nangyari sa seal. Kung yung posisyon ba ng seal ay pareho. No? Hindi, maski na pareho yung serial number, kung iba na yung posisyon ng seal, nakalaw yun. Nakalaw yun. So, napaka-importante nun. Now, two very, you have to know all of these details because it's necessary for the purpose of determining whether they have been tampered with. No? But the most important to me are the slots of the SD cards and the slot of the transmission cord, where they put in the transmission cord. That has to be completely sealed on election day. Both have to be completely sealed on election day and in the same position and the same serial number as the vote testing day, which was 3 days before. So hindi lang dapat masipag kumuha ng pictures nung kung gaano kayo kasipag magpa-selfie, dapat ganun din sila kasipag kumuha ng. Pwede rin sila mag-selfie with the machine itself. So may evidence na nandun sila. No? Hindi ho bawal yan. No? But all of these things are allowed. You're not disallowed from taking pictures of anything during this time or during the voting, except the ballot of the voter, because you might be taking evidence of voting for the purpose of informing the one who bought the votes. Next slide. Okay. So these are the important parts. The screen of the VCM machine is larger than the one that they used in 2010. Kaya tinawag na itong vote counting machine. Hindi na siya tinatawag na PCOS machine. Pero pareho rin yan. Mas maganda lang ang screen, mas maganda lang ang audio. Saka, yung ballot slots, the button on the left side, in the middle is the security key, where the member of the board of election inspectors inserts his security key in order to start the machine. The machine won't start without this security key. So note the important parts of the machine. These two slots in front are the slots for the SD card. Make sure that it has not been tampered with or touched until the voting itself. Next slide. Okay. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, this is where the transmission cable to the modem shall be connected. So if there are pictures that the watcher should take, it should be these parts of the machine. But hindi naman tulad dati na may film at na limited ka to 24 pictures. Ngayon, maski na basta maganda lang yung memory ng kung 32 gigabytes ang memory ng kwan mo, marami ng pictures makukuha yun. Sobrang marami na yun. Next slide. Yan, the memory card slot. The cards being used these elections are not CF cards anymore. They're SD cards. Your SD card. Next slide. Yeah. Okay. Now, let's go to pre-testing. Now, once the member of the Board of Election Inspector puts the security key on the slot that I pointed out later on, this is what will appear on the screen. You know. During the pre-testing, makikita yan ng watcher kasi they're surrounding the Board of Election Inspectors. Eh. Pero baka mahirapan kang makita depende sa position mo in the precinct on election day. Remember, it's the right of this is important. If your watcher was early, nauna siya, she should choose the best spot designated in the place designated for watchers. No? Because the BEI has to designate a spot for watchers where they can clearly observe what is occurring inside. Hindi sila pwedeng ilagay sa isang lugar na halos mahirap ang visibility. No? It's their right and it's in the election code that the watchers are entitled to a place inside the precinct where they could observe everything from the what's happening on the desk of the Board of Election Inspectors to the machine itself. No? Next slide. Okay, yan yung pagpasok ng security key, magbubukas ngayon. Next slide. And this is what appears on screen. Open voting. This is the screen for open voting. The member. Next slide. After the open voting part is touched by a member of the Board of Election Inspectors, two members of the Board of Election Inspectors will have to insert their PIN, their PIN. If the PIN of both members is correct, if what they put in is correct, bubukas yan, and the machine will start to initialize. Next slide. Now, once nangyari yan, open voting, tinouch yung open voting screen, initialize, no? And when they touch the initialize part of the screen, mag-initialize yan at lalabas yung printout which should show 0 votes. The same thing was also done during the pre-testing. Dapat 0 votes bago sila magte-test voting. No? So, kung lumabas ng 0 votes, dapat satisfied ka o member of the Board of Election Inspectors that the machine is okay and has no votes inside at all. But there is another problem here. No? Kung napalitan yung SD card, that's why it's very important also to watch the SD card slot. Kung napag-insert sila ng ibang SD card, pwedeng instruct ng SD card, sasabihin niya, pakita mo na 0 votes yan. Tapos pagkatapos na napakita ng 0 votes, ang bibilangin niya yung nasa loob ng SD card, hindi yung tamang boto. So, the SD card slot, remember, this is all observation, and this is all picture taking, and this is all video taking. No? Because kung ganyan ang allegation sa presintong yun, you have to have hard evidence of possible substitution of the SD card. Because that predetermines the configuration that instructs the behavior of the PCOS machine. Next slide. Next slide. Now we're in testing. At the start of the testing, the BEI explains the purpose of the testing. The BEI would then choose 10 people who would be the test voters. No? Instruct your watcher to volunteer. instruct your watchers to volunteer so that they know the feel of what's it like to actually vote before the voting day, and write down their observations. Show to the public that because it's sealed, and remove the seal, as we stated earlier, from the box. From the time it's opened and up to the time that they've seen the PCOS machine inside the box, everything should be sealed. And that should be properly recorded by their
After 27.
smartphone. Make sure also that they've charged their smartphones fully before going to the precinct on election day. Kasi kung problema ang charging na hindi pa natatapos ang election, boost na yung kanilang power. Pati memory, kailangan maganda rin yung memory card na gagamitin nila pa sa cellphone nila. Okay, next slide. Now, the following should be in the PCOS machine box. A checklist of its contents which they can take a picture of for their own use. The PCOS machine itself, which is properly wrapped. Power cord for the PCOS machine. The 10 test ballots. The 10 test ballots for testing are in the PCOS machine itself for the purpose of pre-voting. The envelope containing the spare I button key, 3 rolls of thermal paper, envelopes, and envelope label pin for re-zeroing. A modem, if any. Next slide. Okay, a member of the BEI gets the envelopes and distributes them to the board members. Now, when will these pins be used? When they start voting. Because when it says open vote, if you go back to the slides earlier, pag sinabing open voting, ipapasok ng dalawang members ng BEI ang kanilang pin. Kung mali o hindi lang pinasok yon, hindi makakapagsimula ng voting sa loob ng presinto. Test ballots which should be inside, show the public that the slots for the SD cards are completely sealed. And then they place the PCOS machine on the ballot box and start initializing the voting. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, during the test voting, as we described earlier, the EI opens the PCOS machine for test voting, mag-i-initialize yung vote para sa vote counters at mag-print ng zero report. It's a safeguard to make sure that there are no votes yet stored in the memory of the PCOS machine. But it's not a foolproof safeguard as we gave in the example earlier. Because pwede nang corrupt yung SD card at mukhang zero votes yun, pero hindi pa na zero, pero may votes na pala ang loob ng SD card. Kaya nga last election, maraming nawawalang SD card eh. Kunwari nawawala at hindi mahanap. Diba? Attorney. Okay. The BEI examines the test ballots. Another thing that you'll have to tell your watcher and the supporters of Bongbong Marcos during election day is when you're given the ballot, don't leave to go to the PCOS machine at once. Look at your ballot, baka may shades na yon. Para pakita mo kaagad sa chairman na may shades na ito eh. Bakit ganon? Kasi once nasa PCOS machine ka na, baka mahirapan ka ng humingi ng substitute ballot. Kasi there are only enough ballots as the number of voters in each precinct. Wala, hindi tulad dati na may extra ballots. Ngayon ang policy ng COMELEC kung 185 voters, 185 na ballots lang ang ibibigay. So, anong mangyayari kung may problema? Ang sinasabi ng COMELEC, hindi naman lahat bumoto eh. So, yung mga hindi bumoto, pwede nyo, yun na lang gamitin na. Pero hindi na kami magbibigay ng extra ballots. Yun ang policy this year. So, it's very, observance is very important because the small forms of cheating that seem insignificant but would mean the loss of so many votes for candidates would occur with these machines. Hindi tulad nun na tingi ang pandaraya. Dito, makapagpasok lang ng SD card sa iba't ibang machine, iba na yung lalabas na boto. Pwede ma-zero yung kandidato. Now, before handing it out, the BI generally examines the ballots. But observe, if they didn't examine the ballot, as I said before, tell your watcher, and tell your voters, yung mga supporters ninyo, na bago sila umalis sa table, bago na dala yung balota, papunta sa PCOS machine, tignan muna nila kung merong pre-shading. May isang type ng pre-shading rin na hindi mahalata ng voter. Yun yung paggamit ng invisible ink. Ang mangyayari dyan, binoto mo si Bongbong, nakashade na pala, halimbawa si Isko Meroy, hindi mo nakikita. So hindi ka nag-complain. Nung lumabas ang ballot, ang resibo, hindi si Isko. Ang lalabas, walang votes for the president kasi nag-overvote. Binoto mo kasi yung ban mo eh. Pero dahil invisible yung ink, dalawa pa lang ang lumalabas na ang nabasa ng PCOS machine.
Kaya nag-error po iba.
Hindi mag-error yan, wala lang boto yung presidente. Kasi overvoting yan. Oo, dalawang lalabas na. Well, walang boto. Wala ka nang magagawa doon. Oo. Except asking the chairman, kasi meron rin silang pan-check ng, ewan ko kung binigyan sila ng pan-check ng balota para examine ito mga ganito, kung makikita yung invisible ink. Pero, posible yan. Now, the policy adopted by the COMELEC for rejected votes is, this year is, no substitute ballot. So even if it's not your fault, they wouldn't give you a substitute ballot. You'll have to, but if you can really explain that it's not your fault, they will ask you to wait until the end of the voting day to see if there were voters who did not vote. Because that's the only time they can give you an extra ballot, the extra ballot. So, kung magtitiyaga ka, ayun. Kahit yung hindi matyaga, ewan ko kung anong gagawin nila doon sa extra ballots na. So those are the things that you have to closely watch out for. The forms of cheating are subtle, but they can add to the votes of candidates who wanted to cheat or who cheated. And then the voter shades the ballot and personally inserts it in the PCOS. Only the voter can insert it into the PCOS unless the machine jams. If the machine jams, then the election board can instruct the person to reinsert it, and they're allowed to do this 4 times only. 4 times only. No. After 4 times, wala na, rejected na yung ballot. Lalagay sa slot ng rejected ballots. At kung valid yung reason mo kung bakit na-reject, maghintay ka hanggang matapos yung balota. Kung may extra ballots. Kung wala nang extra, i-record na lang yan sa minutes of voting. Pero wala na, naka-record lang. Oh, sino pa of those 92,500 PCOS machines, would they bother to look at each instance of rejected ballots? What if the ballots inside the box are wet? There were a lot of wet ballots found out in Naga. Was it in- Next slide. Next slide. Okay, ito lang yung sinabi natin during the one. Nakasil dapat yan, pati nakabalot yan ng yung cling wrap, no? Mabuti. Next slide. Okay, this is another thing. Also note, this is the serial number of all the VCMs that will be used this year. Please note this down. This is the serial number. Any other serial number is not an official VCM because this is the only one that they will be using this year. I think I put it in the checklist. In my checklist that will be that you can make a copy of so that you won't have. But if you want to write it down, this is the serial number of the PCOS machine. Next slide. Okay. At this point in time, all of this should be still sealed. You know? And again, we cannot overemphasize the fact that dapat masipag ang watcher ninyo na isulat sa notebook niya yung mga serial numbers. Kung tamad siya magsulat, kunan niya ng pictures. No? Dapat kunan niya ng pictures. No? Next slide. Again, this is very important. The seals on the memory card slots, because this could cause a lot of problems later on. And the memory card slots. Kung meron kang dapat babantayan, mabuti naman sabihin lang ninyo na pag nagsimula, tignan ninyo lahat ng balot kung nandun pa. Pag tinanggal nila ang balot, tignan niyo lahat kung may serial numbers. At kunan ninyo ng picture lahat ng serial number. Simple lang naman They don't even have to write it if they have their card. And then, they should do backup memory. Baka kinunan nila ng picture, tapos nakalimutan nila, nag-selfie sila sa labas, na bula na. No? So, importante yan. No? Full na yung card, hindi na magamit. Next slide. Note the condition of the PCOS machine in the minutes. No? So, you have to write down the PCOS machine is completely wrapped, no evidence of disturbance, no? Or the PCOS machine looks like it was open. Para bang package na galing abroad na natanggap mo bukas na, sinil lang nila ulit. Lahat tayo may experience ng ganun. Ganun lang yun. So, and when they open it, if the machine does not work or any aspect of the machine does not work, that has to be properly noted down in the minutes of both the Board of Election Inspectors and must be noted by the watcher itself. Again, if they're lazy to write, may recorder function naman yung kanilang, they can just say record it in there and take notes later. Next slide. Again, this one, yes?
Some of the watchers are not very, conversant in English, so Tagalog and Bicol might be used as sample.
Yung binigay kong checklist was in English, pero madaling i-Bicolano yun o i-Tagalog.
Yung pag-record nila.
Pag-record nila, kung saan sila komportable.
Yes.
Kung saan sila komportable. Sila rin basta at least meron silang record. At dapat, before, kasi pati requirements ng watches, dapat marunong rin mag-Bicolano yung voter. Halimbawa, may pumasok yung watcher. Halimbawa, may pumasok na voter na hindi nakilala. Mukhang iba yung pangalan na binigay iba ang mukha dun sa kilala nilang ganun ang pangalan. Object sila. Kung nagbibikulan yung mga kwan, dapat alam nila. So, napaka-importante na at least they can speak English, Tagalog, or Bicolano. Something in which they can properly observe and write down. Next slide. Okay, again, on voting day, they have to be there by 5 a.m. Be prepared to have all of your requirements. The certificate that's given to you by the coordinator, by the chairman through the coordinators or those designated, Without that certificate, they will not let you in. And so make sure those certificates, remind them that those certificates are properly in their possession. And wait 3 days before 3 days binibigay na yan kasi you cannot attend the test voting without a copy of those certificates. Be there by 5 a.m. Be prepared with requirements and tools, cell phone, smartphone, smartphone, a small notebook and a ball pen, and those things. And make sure you're assigned to a place where you can see everything. If you're early and the first to be there, then you have the choice of where to stay in that area designated for watchers. But emphasize to them that it must be a place, hindi porket yung boyfriend na late at nandun sa kabila, nandun sila, pangit ang view. Doon sila sa place na makikita nila. No? That's important. Again, note the VCM box if it's open or if it's completely sealed. And if it compares with the picture that you had earlier took as a watcher 3 days before. Check that all the outer seals are intact, and note if the serial numbers on the VCM are the same as those in pre-testing. Now, we've made our checklist in such a way that you don't have to think, ano ba yung kailangan kong i-note. Check mo lang. Check dito, pre-voting day. Check dito, voting day. Pareho. Kung may notice, pareho ang seal, pero iba ng mukhang na-move yung seal. Mukhang natanggal, dinikit uli, kaya pareho ang seal, Pero halatang halata na binuksan ulit, dinikit uli. Yun, kaya napaka-importante ang powers of observation ng ating watchers. Ibang-iba ito nung watcher nung manual election. Kasi hindi mga ganito. Kailangan hindi ka takot sa PCOS machine. Note again if the serial numbers on the VCM are the same as those during testing. Next slide. Now how next slide. It's important for the voter, of course, as watchers or as coordinators, you tell your voters to have to know their precinct even before election day, so that they won't have problems looking for their precinct at that time. And if they have problems, they can call these numbers, which I'm sure will be impossible to reach on election day itself. So it's very important if you're serious about voting. It's very important that you know beforehand the location of your precinct. Next slide. Now, of course, you know the process of voting. This is all in the slides that will be available to you. Next slide. Next slide. All right. One thing about when you enter the voting place, the precinct, you tell the name, you tell the chairman your name and your sequence number. You get your name and the sequence number from the computerized voting list outside. No? Now, that would make it very convenient for you. No? If the chairman is certain that you're the voter, he announces your name and at the same time hands you over the ballot. No? And announces your name. Now, the announcement is very important to catch the attention of the watchers or everyone else. Kasi kung iba yung taong, halimbawa, Ferdinand Marcos, hindi naman si Ferdinand Marcos ang bumoto, kundi si Isko Moreno. At least alam na announcement yon na the chairman and the members of the BEI themselves on their own motu proprio can deny him his vote or question his right to vote. So the next step there, because you're not required to bring an ID on election day. Hindi kailangan magdala, no? Kung talagang voter ka doon. Kailangan mo lang ng ID and your challenge. Pag na-challenge ka, no? Kailangan ipakita mo na yung ID mo yun. Dati, ang ginagawa ng Board of Election Inspectors, maski na wala pang ID at maski na wala pang ID, boboto sila kung pagbobotohin na yan, tapos nire-record sa minutes of voting. Hindi na pwede ngayon yan. No? Kailangan, pag challenge ka, at ipakita ka na ng mga ID mo at mukhang may duda pa rin, hindi ka na muna pagbobotohin. At ino-note yan sa minutes of voting ng Board of Election Inspectors. Kasi kung hindi ikaw yon, baka maganda sana kung may voter verifying machine tulad ng ginagawa sa some parts ng Mindanao. Kasi kung ikaw talaga yon, yung thumbprint mo, dapat magtutugma sa thumbprint mo na nakarecord na sa machine itself. The machine will say, kasi the machine will give a red flag for the BEI and say, huwag niyong bigyan ng balota. Parang ganun yung message. Don't keep. Yes.
The usual process dati, the voters will, look at their names doon sa labas, and then they will get their number.
Yes.
Papasok sila doon, kapakilala sila, at saka hindi naman nilalakasan ng chairman.
Hindi nila nilalaksan. Dapat gawin nila yon.
So, ino-note yun ng watcher pag hindi sinasabi ng with a loud voice yung pangalan.
Hindi ginagawa yon.
Hindi, dati kasi, hindi dati.
Pero nasa kanya na, precaution rin to. Precaution rin to kasi para ma-alert yung mga watchers. Oo.
So, ganun dapat yun.
Baka nag-AML yung watcher. Paano pa?
Hindi, ang gagawin kasi ng voter.
Well, totoo.
Sabihin lang,
When I voted the last presidential election, hindi in-announce.
Hindi po talaga. Yung observation ko sa mga reflection.
Oo.
Hindi naman nila dinalakas.
Pero kung mukhang maraming suspicious, dapat sabi ka na sa chairman na bakit hindi nyo ina-announce. Kasi wala silang right na itina yung process na yun. Nakalagay yan sa process ng voting ng Commission on Election. That's a standard, but it's really not being done. Siguro nahihiya o mahihiya. Saka pagod na rin ang mga yan.
Siguro po, yung pagpunta, siyempre hanapin ng watchers ng voters yung pangalan nila, papasok doon, tatanungin sila, ang pangalan mo, sabi niya, Juan de la Cruz. Sasabihin ng chairman, Juan de la Cruz. Lalakasan niya siguro, parang gano'n.
Parang gano'n. Saka marami na rin na ako nung bumoto rin ako, dala ko yung ID ko, pinakita ko, maski na hindi kailangan. So, more or less, nakukuha na. Pero in most situations, lalo sa mga, kasi halimbawa nasa Mindanao ka, sa mga precinct na meron ng tao may hawak ng precinct, na nakakatakot rin yun. Baka patayin ka. Next slide. Okay. The voter had shaded his ballot. it's very important to instruct the voters to shade it completely. Not an X, not a check, but shade, no? And shade it on the left side of the name. Ha? Because maraming nanloloko ngayon na sinasabi sa right mo, i-shade yan. Mali yung kwan. Kung sa right, si Lenny lahat yung... Hindi. Kasi, ewan ko kung ba't nila sinadyang ilagay yung pangalan niya right beside Bongbong Marcos. No? Pwede mo niyang i-configure yung balo na... So, yeah. If the ballot has been properly shaded and you insert it and there's nothing wrong with the ballot, the vote gets in and gets counted. Once it gets counted, a receipt will come out. A receipt will come out. The member of the BEI cuts the receipt, folds it without looking at what's in the receipt, and gives it to you. Gives it to you to examine. Just to examine. If you're satisfied, you hand it back to the person who the BEI member who handed it over to you, and he puts it in a box, and it's deposited in a box slated for the receipts. No voter has the right to bring it out. In fact, bringing out a copy of the receipt is an election offense. So, never allow a voter to bring out the receipt, and the BI should not allow this practice. No? If the BI does that, take videos and complain and protest, because no one is supposed to bring out the receipt. Everybody knows the purpose of why the receipt is not allowed. No? Kung binili yung boto mo, kailangan mong ipakita yung resibo na siya yung binoto mo. That's to prevent that type of vote buying. No? Next. Okay, the voting hours this year are from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. They're longer than the previous ones. Because in the previous elections, wala namang pandemic.
7 to 3 lang dati.
7 to 3 lang dati. Ang mangyayari ngayon kasi, i-check muna kung kung baka exposed ka sa COVID o ano man.
May thermal gun?
Meron yata silang thermal gun na gagamitin this year. O yung gano'n. Oo, meron yata. Isa pa, yung spacing ng voters sa loob ng precinct. Hindi tulad nun na pwedeng sunod-sunod at magkakatabi.
How about sa labas?
Sa labas, ganun din dapat. Well, sa labas, ewan ko kung paano lang yung enforce yun. Pero the ones supposed to maintain order outside the precinct and beside the precinct should do the same thing. But especially inside the precinct, this year, measures for social distancing will be supposedly strictly enforced. Nasabi ko supposedly kasi pati yung ballot cover hindi naman binibigay sa ibang presinto. Magkakatabi sila, nakikita kung sinong botante. But anyway, as a voter, for your own protection, maintain proper distance. And if it's very crowded inside the precinct, it's very important for the voter to protest and object because of the threat to COVID. No? Now, yung 7 p.m. is not really absolute because if there are still voters outside the precinct in the queue who have not voted, they will be allowed to vote. No? But the process is, pag dumating ang 7 o'clock, lalabas ang isang member ng BEI, take the names of those in the queue in the order in which they are in the queue. No? And cut it at the very end. Kasi mas pag may dumating later, hindi na pwedeng bumoto yun. No? And they would be allowed to vote in the sequence in which they are in the queue. Now, if it's a long queue, at nainip ka, at tinawag ang pangalan mo sa sequence na ito, you would not be allowed to vote, come back and vote anymore. Halimbawa, ihingi ka na, you want to go to the toilet. Pag tinawag ka at wala ka dun sa queue na yon, sorry na lang, hindi ka pwedeng pagbotohin. Alam naman natin dito sa Pilipinas, hindi naman lahat ganun ka-stricto eh. Baka nakita ka na, kung nasa queue ka, the best measure kung talagang you have to do something is to ipaalam mo sa clerk na naglista na pwede bang pull down sa toilet, gano'n. Pero otherwise, hindi dapat payagang bumoto yung umalis sa pila. Next slide. Next slide. Okay. As I said earlier, the persons allowed inside the voting area, the precinct, are the members of the election board, the watchers, the official watchers, and COMELEC representatives, including the representatives of Smart, pangalan na yun, yung nandaya last time, Smartmatic. The representatives of Smartmatic who were called for the purpose. Hindi basta-basta pupunta sila doon at i-override nila ang Board of Election Inspectors para kalikutin yung machine. Ganun yata ang nangyari eh. Last time yung kinalikot yung kwan, tapos biglang dumami yung boto ng ibang kandidato. No? Yeah. Voters casting their votes, and of course voters waiting for their turn to get inside the booths. Next slide. Next. Okay. Persons not allowed to enter or stay inside the polling place, members of the PNP and the military, members of extra-legal police or extra-legal groups, you know. As I said earlier, barangay tanods and even the chairperson or members of the barangay are not allowed at any time to enter the voting precinct, you know, except when they are there to vote. You know. And of course, they're also allowed to be watchers. So except if they're watchers, then they're also allowed to do that. But apart from those exceptions, there are no other exceptions. You know. Barangay official, except to vote or when serving as a member, as a watcher or a member of the board, election board. Next slide. Now, exception. Decision of the BI by majority vote. For instance, someone is absent from the BEI or an emergency occurred. But all of this has to be done by emergency vote of the Board of Election Inspectors. And only on a temporary basis, because if the person who had to go out to substitute was substituted, the substitute should leave immediately upon the return of the absent member. No? Now, security details could be asked by a vote of the members of the election board to safeguard the security of the polling place. But they should be at a place conveniently near the precinct, but outside it, where they could be easily called by the BEI members for the purpose of assisting the BEI for security purposes. No other reason. No. Next slide. Okay. Remember, they cannot bring out the ballot or dati kasi ang ginagawa, alam niyo yung cheating noon, ano? The voter pretends to insert a different ballot into the ballot box. Pero dala niya yung binigay sa kanyang ballot, which is empty. So, yung empty ballot, dadalhin sa kwan at i-fill up. Bibigay naman sa next voter. Ganun yun, sunod-sunod yun. Hindi na pwede yun kasi as I said, precinct specific ang precinct specific ang mga balota. So if the machine rejects the ballot for no other reason, then it might be not be a ballot from that precinct. Hindi tatanggapin yung balotang yon, no? You cannot speak to anyone, except while inside the polling place other than BI or assistors. Must use security folder when preparing the ballot, cannot exhibit contents of the ballot. What about assistors, for disabled persons, for instance? Even if he looks obviously disabled, if he's not registered in the book of voters as disabled, dapat prior registration yan, no? Dapat prior registration. If he's not registered in the book of voters, he cannot be assisted even if he's obviously disabled. Only those disabled persons who are specifically listed in the book of voters or had prior registration as such could be allowed to bring their assistors.
Paano nung if they got disabled after the registration, like
Yes,
a week
I was thinking also of that possibility. I was also thinking of that possibility. Because, yes,
In case, for example, ito lang sa pagpasin ko lang. In case, for example, yung naputulan ka ng kamay, you cannot do the shading. But you are previously registered doon. So you need an assistor.
you need an assistant, but you should have registered it right away.
Dapat
Pero-
ka doon.
May kwento, ang problema kasi dito,
Oo.
mm, the rule is absolute, and there are no exceptions, but the BEI could also vote, but note it down properly in the minutes of voting, that this person was assisted because of, and describe the defects, and kung nagdala ng medical certificate na the other day lang siya na-accident at hindi na siya, that might be properly accepted. But the general rule is strict about it. Next slide. Again, among those prohibited during the elections, bring out the copy of the receipt. Also, that's to prevent showing your resibo to the person. Pakita mo muna sa akin yung resibo mo, baka ko babayaran yung boto mo. Kaya bawal din ang kumuha ng pictures. Kaya ang voters, bawal din ang magdala ng camera for that purpose. Kung may voter man na nakapagdala ng camera, kung hindi na ginamit, i-alert ng watcher. Yung may dalang camera. It's an absolute tool. Hindi pwedeng may dalang camera nakabulsa. No? So hindi naman yata, it's not the job of the Board of Election Inspectors to collect the cameras in their desk to be taken later. The rule is, for voters, they're not allowed to bring cameras.
Pag buboto, wala silang gawin dapat.
Wala silang dala dapat. Kung gusto ng BEI ng dagdag trabaho, mag-set up sila ng table sa labas kung saan iwan yung camera. Tapos ewan ko kung sa loob ng presinto, bawal yun. Pero outside, kung meron silang table na ganito, iwan yung camera nila dito, bibigyan ng number. Kung gusto nilang magkaroon ng bagong problema. Kasi kung may nawalang cellphone doon, sila may responsibility. Okay. Now we've discussed this already, the procedure to vote. The voter approaches the chairman and gives his name, address, and sequence number, and other data if required by the members of the Board of Election Inspectors. At this point, they're not allowed to it's important to emphasize that they're not allowed to bring, they're not required to bring an identification. But it's out of prudence, everyone should bring an identification card. Because you could be properly or improperly challenged by some watchers of the other side. No. Next slide. Next. We discussed this already. Next slide. Okay, ito pa. Ito yung security folder. No? The next slide will show you na in some places, hindi binibigyan ng security folder yung botante. Next slide. Ito, halimbawa, sa Mindanao, obviously sa Mindanao to, tabi-tabi yung mga botante, pero wala silang kopya ng security folder. Actually, violation to ng Board of Election Inspectors. They have to make sure that the ballot is inserted inside the security folder before the voter goes to the place where he shakes the ballots. No? That's a specific instruction of the Commission on Elections. So I don't know how this was allowed. Unless talagang unless winala yung security folders para saka tabi-tabi, hindi naman boot yung kwan. Next slide. Okay. This is the one about the receipt. When before the member of the Board of Election Inspectors turns over the cut receipt to the voter, he or she already puts the indelible ink. Mauuna yun. So, bago mo tignan yung iyong resibo, naka-indelible ink ka na. Naka-indelible ink ka na.
Ink muna bago yung...
Ink muna bago yung kwan. Yan yung sequence. So, ngayon, kung sasabihin niya hindi naman ito ang binoto ko, mahirap i-prove yun. Kasi... Next slide. Next slide. If the ballot is accepted, it automatically goes into the ballot box. No? If it's not accepted, it will be rejected. As I said, you're given 4 times to put the ballot inside. Tell your voter he has the right to insist on having it at least placed at most 4 times. No? There should be an attempt to put in the ballots inside the ballot box. Next slide. Yes. Okay. Premature announcing of votes. Hindi pwedeng lumabas ang member of BEI o chairman para sabihin, pasok na kayo dito, bumoto na kayo, kasi 20 pa lang nakaboto ang nakakaboto. Bawal ho yun. That's an alert to potential cheaters to send in fake voters. No? That's strictly. He's not allowed to make that announcement, nor say this number has already voted. No? You cannot announce the state of voting in the polls. Next slide. Kasi that's an inducement for cheating. No? Ang dami pa hindi bumoto, padala mo yung mga tao natin doon para bumoto. Lalo na kung lax ang one. Ito po yung shortage of ballot procedure na sinabi natin earlier. Again, follow the same verification or identity procedures. Now, there was something that I forgot to mention earlier. When you receive anyone, when you receive your ballot, examine your ballot in front of the, kasi may allegations ng pre-shading or pre-shading ballots dun sa election sa mga embassies natin abroad during the elections last week, no? So, to play safe, if I were the chairman, I'll ask the voter to, kung chairman ka naman at honest ka, you would remind the voter to examine the ballot before he goes to his seat to shade it. No? you would examine the ballot for tears, for pre-shading and those things. Because once the ballot has been torn or certain parts have been stained by ink that are not supposed to be there, those ballots would be rejected. So point out to the chairman na may malaking block of ink dito sa part ng alam mo yung ano yan? Security security parts ng that would lead to the rejection of the voters' ballots. Lalo na kung area ng mga botante ni Bongbong at halos lahat ng mga balota na-spoil, no? So that's very important. Bago man lang mag-shade siya, na-note down na para palitan ng chairman yung binibigay. The chairman cannot insist on giving you a ballot that has already been pre-shaded or has been spoiled because of certain factors like stains, coats, marks, tears. Yes?
Tayo ay nasa watcher, we are orienting the watchers.
Yes, yes.
But, maraming magkakamali na sa voters.
Marami talaga.
So, I think the Comelec has the obligation to educate the voters regarding that.
Yes, dapat may voter, dapat at this point in time, meron na silang mga advertisements sa television at sa social media na sabihin na, lalo last week when the issue of pre-shaded ballots came out last week. And it was all over the social media and the papers. They should have warned people that when you get your ballot, you should examine your ballot before even sitting down, no? Because once you've done that, baka hindi ka na pwedeng humingi ng substitute ballot. So doon pa lang, binigay sa yung chairman, di pwede ito kasi pre-shaded na yung ballot. Obligasyon niya na ibigay sa iyo isang malinis na balota na hindi sila. Next slide. Can we go back? Okay, this is the shortage of ballot procedure. No? Pag kulang ng, as I said, no, if there are 800 voters in a precinct, the number of ballots issued to that precinct is only 800.